Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is George Bryant. George is a founder and principal with Apogee Wealth Partners. George, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before I ask what's the difference in an oaked wine and an unoaked wine, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Well, Mike, first of all, I'm very appreciative that you would bring me on today and let me speak to your listeners. And I think that your process and podcast is a great community service for the Chattanooga area and beyond.
Thank you.
And thanks again for letting me come on and speak with you. And the answer to that question is that I'm an equal opportunity abuser of caffeine and like many different varieties, but this morning was Summit Roast from Kirkland. So just Summit for an FYI.
Is that every morning that you have coffee every morning?
I do, 1 to 3 cups, generally speaking.
Black?
No, I'm a cream and sugar kind of guy. Actually, I'm a almond milk and stevia kind of guy.
Oh.
But black is okay. I like coffee just the way it is most of the time.
You know, when I made that cup of coffee for you, I didn't ask you if you wanted anything in it. I probably should have.
Well, you know, I take it like it is, like life.
That's what I was going to say. That's kind of how you take life, isn't it?
It is.
So you grew up in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Were you born there?
I was. I grew up there, went to, as they say, matriculated there, went to college in Spartanburg. Spartanburg was a textile community that my parents had a business that was reliant on the textile industry for the most part.
Yeah. Siblings?
I have a brother.
Brother? Older, younger?
Older brother.
So you grew up in Spartanburg and you had a family business. What was that?
My parents had a business making sandwiches.
What was the name of it?
Drake's, like a duck.
Oh,
Drake's.
You mean
sandwich.
Drake sandwiches that you would see in the convenience stores?
I don't think so. I think that Drake's was just a small business. I mean, they had, at one time, they had about 20 something employees. In the early 1960s, they were supplying sandwiches to the textile mills in Spartanburg.
Were they doing like the commissary trucks?
Correct. My father called it the dope wagon.
The dope wagon.
Right. And because of Coca-Cola at one point in time had cocaine in it.
Yeah, and people referred to it as dope.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, they did.
As a kid growing up, we had a family business in Memphis, and it was materials handling. So there was a shop to repair the forklifts. And about 10 each morning and about 2 each afternoon, the commissary truck would show up. And that's where I first learned about Drake sandwiches, actually. And I always remember one guy would always yell at like 2 o'clock, "Truck's here!" And everyone would drop their stuff and go out and get their food. But that's when you didn't necessarily have vending machines in the plant.
Correct. And the business was all by hand. And when I mean all by hand, that, you know, there were some ingredients that came prepared, like chicken, for instance.
Yeah.
Generally comes in a can. But most everything else, we boiled and peeled our own eggs. We ground our own cheese. You know, mayonnaise came in a box, but everything was made by hand in large stainless steel bowls.
So as a kid growing up, you were pretty much integrated in helping out, huh?
If you need a lot of eggs peeled, give me a call. I'm very experienced.
And what is the secret to peeling
hot is one. 2 is it's helpful to have them wet when you do it. If you could keep them in the cool water or warm water once you've boiled them and rinsed and replaced that water. And you always start with the fat end, not the pointy end.
Is that because there's more air down there?
There's air, and you're more likely to get under the first layer of the membrane.
So there you go. There's our community service of the day. How to peel an egg. I don't know if we've done that one yet.
I hope your listeners have a low pleasure threshold.
What was it like growing up in Spartanburg? You went to Spartanburg High School, and what were your dreams and ambitions?
Well, I wanted to be a doctor,
Yeah.
but that all changed in college. But growing up in Spartanburg, we grew up in a lower middle class family and neighborhood. I was never hungry or anything like that, but we weren't wealthy people by any stretch of the imagination. And growing up was playing outside,
Yeah.
with friends and neighbors, hide and go seek and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And going to school, literally my elementary school was across the street from my house. My house faced the schoolyard, and the schoolyard was rather large, many, many acres.
That's pretty convenient.
It was. As a matter of fact, my mother loved to tell the story that on registration day, I had to wait until I was almost 7 to become a student in elementary school, because my birthday was in December, so I had to wait. You had to be 6 at that time in South Carolina, at least 6. So on the registration day for school, I beat my mother home from across the street. I wasn't a big fan of school when I was growing up.
Yeah. Play any sports?
I did not.
Yeah.
I was a student, mostly had relatively good grades. I was a good student, but just I never much cared for school.
Yeah. Yeah. I can understand that.
I like learning.
Yeah.
Just school was not my thing.
The structure and all that. You mentioned the sandwich shop, not sandwich shop, but the sandwich business. Any other high school jobs?
I worked during high school and in college, but in high school, I had 2 jobs. The first one was I was the assistant to the assistant janitor at a Belk store, which, pretty far down the line.
Yeah.
And that I did while I was in school. I actually went to work in the afternoons and at the Belk store, and I was, did things like cleaning and those kinds of things. And then I got a job at a car dealer. And to show you how far I advanced, I was the assistant to the assistant lot boy at the car dealer. So yes, I've had a lot of inspirational young man activities as I was growing up.
What does the lot boy do?
So pretty much, that was getting cars ready for sale, moving them in and out of the showroom, cleaning up cars for out of the service department. I think one of the most frightening things I ever did while I was working there was driving Corvettes onto the showroom floor through a 7-foot doorway, which was nerve-wracking to say the least, and then parking them like they wanted them inside the showroom. It was very difficult, and certainly for a relatively inexperienced driver. I think I was 17.
Well, and I was going to say that kind of had to also be a cool job for a 17-year-old. You're getting the latest cars, even though you're just taking them from the parking lot to the showroom floor, you're getting to drive them and see all the latest and greatest technology.
Oh, if that were true.
Yeah.
I got to drive the Chevette, if you remember that magnificent automobile. And then I also got to drive the first of when gasoline was very expensive. This was, I think, 77 or 78. So General Motors, it was a Chevy dealership. So General Motors had all these new cars that they were trying to make smaller and lighter. And
those tin boxes they used to sell.
they just weren't. They certainly, by today's standards, were not luxurious at all. Even you could buy cars that are much nicer today I think, for a lower CPI adjusted price. Cars have gone a long way.
Yeah. So you had some jobs in high school. Were there lessons you took from those jobs, or was it more that you had a family business that everyone worked in and that established the work ethic?
Well, I think that early on, I wanted to have some money.
Yeah.
That I was interested in doing that. And again, it was for more than pocket money. Most of the jobs I had, though, were, especially after high school, were to help me offset costs for college.
Yeah.
I got a full ride to college for the most part, but I still needed cash.
And that was Wofford?
That was Wofford College. Indeed it was. And I had other jobs during every year that I was in college, in the summertime or while I was in school. And I had some interesting jobs and some not interesting jobs. Certainly, when I tell people about some of my jobs from college, they laugh because one summer I worked in a toilet bowl factory for Kohler.
Well, you had all that janitorial experience.
Indeed. There are a lot of jokes that I've told about that when I took a stand-up comedy class here in Chattanooga.
Did you really?
Believe it or not, there was one.
I didn't know that.
Yes, it was one of the most excruciating things I've ever been through.
What motivated you to take a stand-up comedy class?
My wife suggested I do it because she is a creative writer, or was, and she thought it would be, fun for me to do. And it was anything but I got through it. I did and I didn't. At the end, you had to do stand-up. You had to stand in front of a crowd that, folks who were in the class brought their family or guests, and you had to stand up in the I guess it's the round part of the theater center.
Okay.
Here in town.
Yeah. So you had a crowd, about 50 people?
There were probably 30 people there, if that many. But it's hard to be funny.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've known you a little bit.
Particularly if you're not.
Well, see, I was just getting ready to say, I've only known you a few years, and what I have, and I may have even said this to Madison, George has a very dry sense of humor, very dry. And I'm just curious, what was you remember any of your routine? What did you talk about? Or
well, as I alluded to earlier, that I told jokes around the working at the toilet bowl factory, of course, and there were things that I said about that I wish I could remember all of them, but it was you had to write stuff down. It was a very difficult job, and it was hot, and it was sweaty, and I needed the money for college, and I couldn't find a job that summer, and I heard about this job and was hired, and it was tough. But I think that the things that I harkened back to were they allowed me to kind of cop one joke that I said that I was taking the Browns to the Super Bowl. So that's about the best I could do on that on short notice.
How many minutes did you have to prepare?
It was about 4 minutes,
and that's a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, because you get out the first thing, and if people aren't reacting, all of a sudden things are a little quiet.
Yeah, I didn't kill, but I did okay.
Did you?
I did. I did okay. I would not want to take it up as a job.
Yeah. So you don't want to pursue that?
No, I will not take it up as an occupation. I will be an amateur the rest of my life when it comes to comedy.
Well, and then that way, those of us who know you get the benefit of that, because then you can do your comedy with your small group of friends.
And the more I say, the fewer they become.
So back to Wofford, you're mainly working to have spending money. It's not like you're pursuing something that you see as a career or anything, or that interests you.
No, as a matter of fact, another job I took during the summertime was I was a camp counselor at what is now called Asbury Hills in Greenville County, South Carolina, and that was an interesting summer. And I don't think that I would say anything that's untoward, but the camp director and I did not get along very well, and it started at the very beginning and stayed that way. So every job that was, that nobody wanted, like digging around the cabins and retarring and repapering the foundation, or cleaning the bathrooms or things like that, I got. Those jobs I got when I didn't have kids to supervise.
You volunteered for those, didn't you?
No. But it was a great experience, though, because, literally you're out in nature for, several months. It was an interesting job. And I had a lot of experiences that I would never have had had I not gone there.
How about working for someone that you're not getting along with? I mean,
well, fortunately for me, it wasn't anything that would be fisticuffs or anything like that. It's just
some personalities don't fit.
Exactly. I was loud and obnoxious, and he didn't think that was very funny. And It was great to work with kids part of the time, and then part of the time it wasn't, depending on the group of people you got.
Yeah, I can imagine. How old were the kids, preteens and teens?
I had 8 to 12-year-olds.
Wow.
Yeah, boys. So it was, there were, generally speaking, somewhere between 8 and 10 in a cabin.
Yeah.
And I managed them.
And what was your takeaway from that? Is there any lesson you learned trying to, like a better description, manage those boys that you use today?
Never tell a child anything because their memory is pristine and they have total recall. Don't make promises that you can't keep.
Well, that's a big one.
It is.
Yeah.
Never having children myself, I don't think that had anything to do with it. Maybe. But it was, I learned a lot that summer. I really did. And being outside, I gained an appreciation for, nature and things that a lot of folks never got to do, like walk in a creek and, trail hike and make trails and that kind of stuff. It was an interesting job. It beat working at the toilet factory, but it paid less.
Yeah. And you're at Wofford, and what are you pursuing at Wofford?
So when I first got there, I was pre-med, and due to a series of unfortunate events, I ended up taking. I was majoring in chemistry, figuring if I didn't have if I didn't make it in medical school, I'd at least have a degree I could use out once I was finished. And it could be working. There were a lot of chemical plants around Spartanburg. Those kinds of things I thought I could fall back on. But as I went through and I failed a class, which was the first class I'd ever failed, other than in high school where I kind of squeaked out with a D in another class, that I had an interest in economics to begin with. And I was dating a girl from Converse College who was taking that and passing it. And she was, a regular intelligence level and, a pretty smart girl. And I said, well, if she could pass it, I likely can pass it. So I started taking economics courses in my junior year and finished up the major in 2 years. And
you said you had an interest in economics. So did that fulfill the fact that you're not going to pursue pre-med? You turned to economics and kind of to where you are today.
It is, and it's been helpful for me. I had an interest in money early on.
Yeah.
More than just I needed to get some money and took a job. I was interested in investing and that kind of thing. As a matter of fact, I started investing right after college. A little, I was given shares of bank stock by my dad. It's a gift as I graduated from college. So I had that and I changed it to something I wanted to buy and that kind of thing. It was interesting to me, and compound interest is one of those fascinating things that is miraculous in its intensity and what it'll do for you over time.
Which a lot of people don't really understand or realize.
Right. They don't. And, I remember I had a neighbor, was a young man, probably 10 or 11 years old. And I asked him if he would like to have $1 million or a penny a day doubled for 30 days. And of course he said the $1 million. And I asked him to take out his phone and start doing the math. And about day 25, he looked at me with wide-eyed as he could be and said, I think I want the penny a day doubled. I think you're probably right.
So your interest in money wasn't necessarily, I want to accumulate as much as I can. It was really about how money works.
It is. And that all came to a head when I was, after I was out of college and in a job. I worked in retail. I worked for Circuit City, and I was a salesperson or a sales manager or a manager, depending on when when in history you talk to me about it. And I decided, I saw my parents' tax return in the mid to late 80s. And they were living in poverty.
Yeah.
And I decided at that point in time that I didn't want that to happen to me or for anyone else for whom I could prevent it. And that's what led me to the business I'm in today. I heard about this occupation called financial planner, and that's how I literally got into that. I was also kind of dismayed in retail.
Yeah.
And this will date me, of course, but nobody needs a third video recorder.
Right.
They may want a third video recorder, but they don't really need it. And that led me to, and this, along with seeing my parents' tax return, just made me want to be in the financial planning industry, although it was very difficult to get in and I wasn't very successful at it at the beginning.
So obviously a seminal type event. I mean, you're working in retail and you're right. Wants and needs. What am I doing? I'm just moving product. You're working the floor.
I've solved people's needs, but it wasn't terribly fulfilling.
Yeah. And was it that chance that you saw your parents' tax return that kind of lit the light bulb that said, I want to teach people the power of money or the power of investing?
Well, I wanted to educate myself about it first. I wanted to learn about that. And I'd always, and I'd read Kiplinger magazine and things like that for a long, long time. And actually had, software that I bought on my own that, helped filter mutual funds and things like that. So I started early, before I had this epiphany, I guess you would say. But I do feel like we as Americans don't get too much education in money. And we don't want to talk about money.
It's not polite.
It's impolite. Our parents told us not to talk about it. It's one of those things that you hear that tape running in your head that you don't want to talk about that with people. You certainly don't want to brag about it. I think, however, as a practical matter, the more you know and the more you talk about it, it's more demystified and you're able to make better choices.
Well, that's true. That's what we're told on every subject except money.
I think you're right.
Talk about it. You'll feel better. You'll understand more. You'll do this. But no, don't talk about money.
It is a verboten topic in some respects. And from my perspective, I like the fact that it's my avocation as well as my occupation. Now, my wife would tell you I need a life. I'm not I don't have a lot of hobbies. I spend a lot of time thinking about my clients.
Yeah. It's a pretty good hobby. If you're a client.
Well, I think so. I think it's beneficial to clients. Yeah. But the other part is that it's dynamic, particularly in today's world where, we've had really quite a bit of change in the retirement business over the last 8 years with the Secure Act and Secure Act 2.0 that has changed the landscape for a lot of people and made the process of inheriting an IRA more complicated and it's hard to keep up with that stuff sometimes. That's one of the reasons why, when I'm asked if I do a lot of reading, I say yes. And they say, what have you read that you've enjoyed? I said, nothing or very little.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot to keep up with. Tax law and, how taxes impact clients and just the procedures around it, because there are penalties that happen if you don't do the right thing. And
So you've been working in Circuit City. You decide you want to go in this direction. How do you get to where you want to go? What do you do next? You quit Circuit City and you go find a local financial firm to apply to, or what steps you take?
Actually, I went to work for Ameriprise.
Okay.
What is now known as Ameriprise, and and you can hire in as a financial planner. You're not certificated as such as a certified financial planner if you do that, but you come in as a personal financial planner. And I learned a lot there, but I wasn't very successful at selling insurance and annuities and low mutual funds. So I moved on to a different place that was set up as financial planning and credit unions. And that changed from a salaried position to a commission position. So I left there and ended up at Charles Schwab working as a registered representative there. And I was there about 3 years, and then I moved to Chattanooga, thankfully.
What brought you to Chattanooga?
I was hired by an accounting/investment advisory firm because I was working with the advisors as one of my jobs at Charles Schwab. And I got hired there, and I will always be grateful for the fact that I got to move to Chattanooga. We were in Nashville at the time. I'd moved around in retail. And my wife worked retail for a while, so we really were burning candle at both ends for a period of time.
Yeah, bet your schedules were passing each other.
Explains why I don't have children. So that's where I got into the registered investment advisory business.
What year was it that you moved to Chattanooga?
94.
So you've seen some change in this place too.
Oh, it's remarkable. What a great town we live in. I can't say enough good things about Chattanooga. Being not a native, you'd think that I was on some kind of tourism or business board. The way I talk about it, I explain to people what a great place it is to live, and they should be here.
When you moved here, did you think this was a long-term stop, or did you think, okay, I'll see how it is and then maybe look at the next opportunity?
Well, my wife and I got married in 84, and by 94, we had changed addresses 9 times.
In 10 years?
I moved around a lot.
That's a lot, George.
I did. I moved to an apartment in a new town and then moved to a house or that kind of rental most of the time. But it was very, retail moves you around a lot.
Yep.
With Circuit City at the time. So I did have a great deal of moving around. And so when I first landed in Chattanooga, it was different than Nashville. It was a lot different. Mm-hmm. There weren't a lot of nice restaurants. And I remember going to the dry cleaner, and they said, I was there about 9:00 in the morning and handed them my shirts, and they said, "When do you want them?" And I said, "Well, I'd like them this afternoon." And they went, okay. It was, we're in Nashville, in by 9, out by 3.
That was expected.
Yeah, that was on their door.
Yeah.
So, but I have any of those slight disappointments I had about moving to Chattanooga are long forgotten and replaced by great memories of a beautiful place to live with great people and a very donative population. Very few places have the kind of donative spirit that Chattanoogans have. It's, I explained to people when I was on on a board or when I worked at a bank here in town, that United Way and all the other places here in town have foundations that support them. So if you give $1 to the United Way, it goes to somebody.
Stays in town.
That's right.
Yeah.
It doesn't go to salaries and that kind of thing. So it's a wonderful, wonderful town because of that. Plus, it's picturesque. And
when I first moved here, talking about the donative factor in Chattanooga, when I first moved here, I was trying to meet a lot of people, go have coffee, go have lunch. And one of them, I asked one person, I think it was Dan Nosley at the Times Free Press. I said, what's an organization I should get involved with that, not only can I meet people, but it is effective in this town and is well thought of in this town? And he said, United Way. He said, you got to get involved in that. And I couldn't agree with him more. Got involved with that early on. And to your point, the fact that a lot of these organizations have a foundation that pays the expenses and every dollar goes to help someone as opposed to administrative costs.
It's remarkable and highly unusual.
It is. So you get here in Chattanooga, you're here in 94. Talk about your career path here in Chattanooga and leading up to where you are today with Apogee Wealth Partners.
Well, I worked in the at the accounting / investment advisory firm for 5 years, and it became clear that the only way that I was going to become a partner there was to become a CPA, and which was that was their process, and which is fine. But I didn't want to become a certified public accountant. I liked what I was doing and doing, investment management and financial planning. So I decided that I'd move along, and I went to work for a bank here in town as a financial planner. And I did that for about a year or so. And then the bank had a position open in the trust department, and I went to work in the trust department. I did that for about 7 years.
I would imagine the trust department's an interesting place, particularly when you're in a town the size of Chattanooga with again, the word donative based out there. Can you talk a little bit about what makes the trust department the way it is, or a good one?
Well, yeah, I can't compare because I've only worked for one, but I would say this, that, those type of arrangements are meant for long-term benefits. And there were a lot of those that were not-for-profits, and not-for-profits used the trust department for, custody and investment management. So I think from my perspective that the trust department world is a place where clients who have, a considerable amount of assets and they want to keep those for a long period of time find it a very comforting place to have assets custodied and have them managed. I guess the only thing that I would say is maybe a slight negative would be the fact that they have most of the time they'll have their own management staff, their own portfolio manager. So clients may or may not be able to say who manages the money.
Gotcha.
And that could be a good thing, I guess, as well, because then there's a consistency in management over time.
So in your desire to not just learn more about money, but teach people about money, what is the thing that, and Madison's here with us, and Madison's about my daughter's ages. What would you say to someone of Madison's age that they need to start doing today?
Well, I think the first thing is that acknowledge the fact that it's hard. It's very difficult to save money. That's something that is particularly difficult to do when you consider the save messages you get in a year and the spend messages you receive in a year.
And those aren't in balance.
No, because most of the time you don't get very many, if any, save messages. Particularly if you're working for yourself, or even in a company, you maybe once or twice a year you hear about the 401k plan, or you're automatically enrolled now, thankfully. Mm-hmm. But those are few comparatively to what you see on television or social media or radio. And that avalanche of spend messages. And then, of course, that, when things are on sale, you save money.
Oh, yeah.
Except you don't. I could have already retired on the money I had saved over these years from buying things. And the truth of the matter is you don't. I agree that, money just for money's sake is not necessarily something that I aspire to, but I certainly want to be comfortable, particularly in retirement. And the fact that I don't have children makes it even more important. It's just, people ask me, well, you don't have any children. Who's going to take care of you when you get old? And I said, whoever I pay.
Yeah.
Because I know who it is.
Yeah.
Having children doesn't mean you're going to have someone there either, but
that's true too.
I'm certain about who it is. It's going to be whomever I or my wife and I pay.
Mm-hmm. So after the trust department, what was next?
Well, I left there and went to work for another registered investment advisory company. And then my old boss at the bank retired, and I went back to the bank for a few years. The job was eliminated. I went to another RIA and then another RIA when I got a chance to work with Chris Hopkins again, that you know. And then after that, we decided to open our own shop. And that's what we did, and opened Apogee Wealth Partners in 2021.
So since 2021, Apogee's been going, and you and Chris seem to have a good yin yang. You guys get along well.
We do. I've known him for a long time. As a matter of fact, when the place I first moved to work in Chattanooga, I actually hired him, and after that, he hired me. So it's been a great relationship, and he's a fine person. And both Chris Hopkins and Jennifer Hairston are incredibly talented and intelligent people. And they have exactly what I have when it comes to our clients, and that is doing the right thing is always the right thing to do.
Well, and talk about what caused you to form it, what your mission was, because you guys are very client-centric with that, and what your goals and aspirations are for Apogee Wealth Partners.
Well, the reason why we did it is because I think we all had a desire for a more holistic approach to clients instead of just money management. Not just the investing part, but to look at their whole situation, taxes, their estates, insurance, and things like that. Although we don't sell insurance, we don't sell any products, as we're fiduciaries. So our whole focus is to take care of the client in that way, so we can look at them for more than just the investment side of it. So if clients have a question about something that is related to their financial situation, or sometimes not, they're free to call us and talk to us anytime. And that means, we do not hold business hours. If a client has something that is upsetting them or they're concerned about on Saturday night at 8 o'clock, I want them to call me. Mm-hmm. And Chris is the same way, and Jennifer's the same way. And I think that makes a difference to clients. And I think they can see that and feel it when we're in a room with them and they get to know us. But the most important thing for us is, again, to treat them as we'd want to be treated. We want the same thing that they do. We want their assets to grow, and we want them to, have a smooth ride and as much as possible within the marketplace, which we all agree is not smooth, but to help them along the way and help them reach their goals.
Well, and you mentioned something, a word earlier that I want you to expound upon, fiduciary, because you'd said when you went to first work for Ameriprise, then it went to a commission position, and you left there. Explain why a fiduciary is different, because they're not commission based.
Well, I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody in the business. They're just different models, and the registered investment advisory model is one of a fiduciary. We have to act in the best interest of our clients. So whatever that is, the best interest of our client is the utmost and only goal. It's very straightforward. We want the same thing the client does. We're on the same side of the table. And so that standard is by law, but it also is the esprit de corps, as it were, for our firm. I mean, it's very straightforward, and we don't have a conflict of interest about recommending one product over another because it pays us more. We actually want to try to find the least expensive product that will meet the needs of the client, because over time, any costs associated with the investments take away from the performance of that account. Yeah. So it's very straightforward, to repeat myself again.
What's a mistake a guy like me makes? I'm 62. And when you see someone and you go, man, I wish you'd come to me 40 years ago or 20 years ago, or what's someone in my, like myself, that you see is pretty common?
Well, I think for many Americans, we're undersaved. Most Americans are undersaved, and that's a big deal. Yeah. Because Social Security was never designed to be the only income you had in retirement. It was part of a triad: your savings, pensions, and Social Security. So all those things were part of it. Now pensions have been replaced with 401k plans. So savings, now it's just not even a stool anymore. It's Social Security and your savings. Yeah. And clients have a great deal of difficulty understanding or even imagining themselves getting to a place where they're financially comfortable, because the numbers are enormous for most people. When you start talking about millions of dollars, it's very difficult for people to imagine themselves there. And that's a problem. If you say you can't, you likely won't. Right. So for someone who is undersaved at 62, it's going to be working longer, and it's going to be doing without some, and because I didn't really start saving in earnest until I was in my 30s. And it took a bout of being almost bankrupt to solve that problem. And oddly enough, I went bankrupt, I didn't go bankrupt, but I was impoverished in a lot of ways when I was working as a financial planner because it was far more expensive than I expected, and I wasn't very good at it as part of being a salesman. So I learned a lot at that point in time by bringing my lunch to work and not buying things I didn't need. And I still do those kinds of things. So living frugally is one of the easiest ways to save money, but it's not easy to do because we have, again, all these messages that we receive on a regular basis to spend money.
Well, and I'm someone who's guilty of putting those messages out there, having been in broadcasting media sales for all those years.
I forgive you.
It worked out for me, but I know the message in that is, you got to have this. And to your point, just because you bought something on sale doesn't mean you saved money. You still spent the $20.
Right. And if it's something you need, that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we as humans have a very difficult time discerning between needs and wants. And for someone like Madison, I would say the earlier you begin, the easier it's going to be because of the frequency of doubling periods. The rule of 72 tells us that if you take an interest rate and you divide it into 72, it gives you the number of years it takes to double in a compound environment. So if you get 6% on your money, it doubles every 12 years. If you get 8%, it doubles every 9 years. Now, that doesn't sound like a big difference, but if you think about it over 36 years from 30 to 66, that's the difference between having $2, $4, $8 for every dollar you invested, or 16 invested at 8%. So people say, well, how can I get the extra 2%? Well, one of the ways of doing that is not paying taxes on the money when you first invest it, for instance, in a 401k plan.
Yeah.
So you get a deduction for that, or you don't pay tax, rather.
Not until you pull it out, utilize it.
And of course, the math on that, depending on the tax bracket, it's about the same. It really is about the same. But at the end of the day, I have more money to spend.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I've tried to instill in my daughters, particularly if they're working for a company that offers a 401k and with a match. Absolutely hold enough that you're getting the match, the full match, because that's free money.
It is. And first rule of financial planning is never turn down free money.
That's a pretty good rule.
It is. It's a pretty good rule. So not only the time factor, but also making sure that you stay invested over the long term, and you become accustomed to the facts that the market goes up and down, and it can go up and down a lot. And those downtimes are when people are most concerned about it. I seldom get complaints when the market is up 10 or 12% a year, but if it's down 10 or 12%, people are concerned, and I understand exactly why, because I've done this for a long time. But the point of the matter is that if I think on it, whenever I try to time the market, and I've done that a couple of times in my life, I've lost more money that way than I did by staying invested over time. So it's very difficult for clients to stay invested during periods of time, but that's almost always the best, time to add money too. When the market's down 12 or 20%,
it's a time to buy.
Pretty much time to add money if you have it,
because you're saving money.
Well, you're buying part of a business, in the case of the stock market, at a lower price. And generally speaking, the last time I looked, that if there's a sale at a retailer of a product you need, would you buy, like, let's say something as mundane as paper towels? If they're on sale, you may buy more of them because they're cheaper, and
they're not going to go.
Then it's not going to go bad, and that kind of thing. But with the stock market, people are just the opposite. They look at it and say, now that it's
up, I got to get in.
There's fear of missing out, and then on the other side, that I feel badly the market is down. Well, add more money if you have it, and if you don't, then stay invested. And of course, it all depends on your risk tolerance too. I don't want to make these broad generalizations that don't come along with a, caveat that you have to be invested along with your risk tolerance and your goals. Because some people have to take more risk to get to where they need to be, and others don't have to take those risks if they've saved or if they've invested previously.
I've found in times that it's down, I've learned to not look at it because I would look and go, what do you mean it's down? Because you're right. Over the course of time, it's always growing.
Generally speaking. And I would expect that for a long, long time.
Yeah.
The general trend of the marketplace is up, but it doesn't always do that. And as a matter of fact, history is one of those great educators. And being faithful is very important, just like in a lot of things in life. So, for instance, the Dow went over 1,000 in 1972, and then it didn't go over 1,000 again until 1982. That's a long time to be faithful.
That was a tough decade.
Indeed, it was. Yeah. So, as an investor in equities, you had to be very faithful and you had to hang on.
Yeah.
And that took a long time. And then again, keep in mind, in 1982, the Dow was 1,000.
Yeah.
And today it's 42 times that.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And the other part of that is just the math. Again, penny a day, double it every day.
And that's such a great example. You've got this is my opinion. You have a passion for educating people on money.
I don't want them to suffer the same fate my parents had living in poverty and retirement. I just, that's an awful thing to be. They had their own business for 37 years and, had some professional help, but never opened up a retirement plan. Of course, back then there weren't too many other than a pension, but, IRAs came about and that kind of thing. And they just didn't do it. And it's not because my parents weren't frugal, because they were both Depression era children. And
yeah.
They were very, very frugal. But if you don't know, you can't act. And the things you don't know about money are innumerable.
And I'm so glad you brought that back to your parents, because to me, it shows what drives your passion and how you want to help educate others to where they can make the decisions that are going to benefit them later.
Exactly. And because we are fiduciaries at Apogee Wealth Partners, then, the information we give to clients is directly for their benefit. There's no other stop along there. It's just for their benefit.
How does someone get in touch with you or Chris or Jennifer?
Well, you can reach us easily through our website. That's apogeewp.com, and that's spelled APOGEEWP.com. Or we have a phone number, of course. The office number is 423-567-1888.
And before I get to the last question, I do want to tell you, I love the name Apogee because it's, apex, a point in the future that you're pointing to. Who came up with that?
That was my partner, Jennifer Hairston. So, luckily for me, I work with two extraordinarily, as I said earlier, talented and intelligent people. I'm just the pretty face, but she came up with that idea, and I think it was a terrific. It's terrific for that.
It says everything you need to know.
Well, it does. Not everyone knows what that means. The highest point, or it's also cosmological in an elliptical orbit. The furthest point a satellite is around the body that it orbits is the apogee, and the closest point is a perigee. So that's where it came from.
Oh, I never knew perigee. Mm-hmm. I should have paid more attention in science. I do want to remind our listeners, George, who makes all this possible, and that's the Tennessee Valley Authority. I thank them for sponsoring My Morning Cup. You can follow TVA on social media to learn more about its most multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do good here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. All right, George, last question. What would you tell your 25-year-old self, the 25-year-old George Bryant, is important for a happy life?
I think it's important to treat others with respect and and learn what they know and accept them for who they are. I think my partner talked about relationships. I think that's part of it. But treating others as you'd want to be treated is is an important tenet in how I look at my life.
Golden rule is pretty important, isn't it?
Well, it is. And fortunately for me, I was able to marry way up and being married a little over 40 years. I was fortunate to have a great partner in my personal life, and I have great partners in my professional life as well.
Boy, that's so important. So important. I appreciate you coming and talking to us.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate the time that you've spent with me and allowed me to ramble about what I think and what I think I know.
Well, it's been good for me because I've gotten to know you better, and I would just want to reiterate that anyone that's got those financial questions and needs to know more should talk to you or Chris or Jennifer. And I appreciate the time you've spent with me.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.